He kind of stumbled up to his room, and his wife kind of undressed him, tucked him into his bed, and she kneeled by his bedside to pray. And as she did, she looked at her husband and she said, "John, do you want me to pray for you?" He nodded his head in agreement, so she began. "Dear Lord, I pray for my husband who lies here before you drunk." And with that, he interrupts her and says, No. Don't tell God I'm drunk. Just tell him I'm sick. There we go. It took a couple seconds. Many of us know what this thing is, measuring tape. I personally think it is invaluable, only compared to a pair of pliers, and maybe some duct tape, and some screwdrivers. It's a great tool. Now, a measuring tape will not guarantee that you'll make a mistake, but it will make sure that you can have the exact measurements of anything that you measure. And the best part about a measuring tape is that I can come tomorrow and the measuring will be exactly the same. In fact, I can come next week and measure and it will be exactly the same on the measuring tape. If I get out another measuring tape, it will be the same. I can take this to another country and maybe even another measuring tape from another country. It might be in meters, but all I need to do is to convert, and it will be the same thing. There is one standard when it comes to a measuring tape. Are we there yet? This summer, we've been talking about this traveling motif. And the reason why is we do so much of that. We travel to go on vacation. We travel to get out of town. We travel to go to places such as Lake Minnetonka. We hop in the car to go somewhere, and the reason we do that is where we live. We live far from anywhere, so we travel. And so we ask that question, are we there yet? Here's a story for you of a pastor that was getting ready to go on vacation. He took his car to the car wash, and he was buying some CDs, and he spotted 2 CDs of the Beach Boys. And so he purchased them, and when he got to his car, he looked at the receipt and realized that he was undercharged. He paid only 99 cents a piece for them when they should have been $4.99. And so he goes back to the cashier and he says, I think there's been a mistake here. I owe you at least $8 plus tax on these CDs. And the woman looks at him and says, yes, I know. I was in church last week, and I just wanted to see if you were an honest man. Ouch. Now that hits close to home. Do we measure up? Do I, as a pastor, measure up? Whether one is in the professional ministry or one is a professing Christian, people are watching us. Remember those magnets that we used to stick on the back of our cars that are now sitting in most of the car washes around the valley? That kind of identified us. We measured up to a certain type of standard. It is, I guess you could say, the measuring tape that we live up to. I want to tell you the story of a boy by the name of Eric Arnold. Growing up, I did not have the best of childhoods. I was picked on quite a bit, bullied quite a bit in grade school. But when I was about 8 or 9 years old, Eric Arnold moved to Douglas, Nebraska, that same town that the Ekdals lived in. And when Eric came in, he was funny, he was goofy, he wore these wild clothes. In fact, even this shirt would probably be pretty tame to what Eric wore. Eric also liked Prince, and he loved the movie Goonies. Here is a current picture of Eric. As you can tell, he's still a bit goofy. One thing I remember, there were 2 things I remember specifically about Eric. I remember he had really bad acne, and he had this special soap that he had to use. And I also remember that he got along with everybody. I mean, nothing fazed him. And I wanted to measure myself up to Eric Arnold. Eric was not a bully, and yet he got along with the bullies. He was not an athlete, but he got along with the athletes. He was not smart, but he got along with the smart kids. But the only people he didn't get along with were the teachers who just quite didn't get his boisterous personality. I liked Eric Arnold. I admired him. I was impressed with his ability to relate with all kinds of people. And my goal was to measure up to Eric Arnold. Not by getting more acne. I didn't want that, although I did like Prince and Goonies. I decided I was going to be more funny. I was going to be more goofy like Eric Arnold. And so when the bullies picked on me, I joked with them. I laughed with them just like Eric did. And I found it worked. Their attitude changed. Now, I remember my goofball antics weren't so appreciated with the teachers there in Douglas, but in my attempts to measure up to Eric Arnold, I noticed something about myself. I felt better. And I was feeling better than I had in a very long time. I was able to use humor and joking to get these kids to quit picking on me, and I also learned that humor can deflect from a serious or difficult or uncompromising situation. So for good or for ill, measuring up to Eric Arnold, in that process I learned something about myself. This summer, not only have we been talking about traveling, but we've been talking about the stories of the prophets coming from the Old Testament. These individuals, what they did is they went around Israel and they said to the people, "Are you measuring up to what God has in store for us?" They traveled. They reminded the people of their special place with God. Today we get the opportunity to hear from another prophet, this one by the name of Amos. And his warning is dire. Measure up or be destroyed. Kathy?
Thank you. This is Amos 7 through 17. This is what he showed me. The Lord was standing by a wall that had been built true to plumb, with a plumb line in his hand. And the Lord asked me, "What do you see, Amos?" "A plumb line," I replied. Then the Lord said, "Look, I am setting a plumb line among my people Israel. I will spare them no longer. The high places of Isaac will be destroyed, and the sanctuaries of Israel will be ruined. With my sword I will rise against the house of Jeroboam." Then Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, sent a message to Jeroboam, king of Israel. "Amos is rising a conspiracy against you in the very heart of Israel. The land cannot bear all his words, for this is what Amos is saying. Jeroboam will die by the sword, and Israel will surely go into exile, away from their native land." Then Amaziah said to Amos, "Get out, you seer. Go back to the land of Judah. Earn your bread there and do your prophesying there. Don't prophesy anymore at Bethel, because this is the king's sanctuary and the temple of the kingdom." Amos answered Amaziah, "I was neither a prophet nor a prophet's son, but I was a shepherd, and I also took care of sycamore fig trees. But the Lord took me from the tending of the flock and said to me, 'Go, prophesy to my people Israel.' Now then, hear the word of the Lord. You say, 'Do not prophesy against Israel, and stop preaching against the house of Isaac.' Therefore, this is what the Lord says. Your wife will become a prostitute in the city, and your sons and daughters will fall by the sword. Your land will be measured and divided up, and you yourself will die in a pagan country. And Israel will certainly go into exile, away from their native land." God bless his word.
Thank you. Today, Amos is telling the people, God is watching you. Now to Israel, he is saying, we are a beacon of hope to the entire world. We have the ability to do God's work, to be faithful to God. That is our job. But Amos's prophecy to Israel is, are you measuring up? Now, this passage that was read for us today is a very popular translation. This idea that Israel should be measuring up. In fact, how often this gets read is, this is what he showed me. The Lord was standing beside a wall built with a plumb line in his hand. Now, a plumb line is used by architects, if you can see, to kind of measure, to kind of make sure that things are straight, everything is in line. This is a popular translation, but it may not be the correct one. Because the idea, plumb line actually comes from the word Anak, A-N-A-K, which is an ancient and Akkadian word, and it really translates as 10, or kind of an audible sigh of disappointment. We've all had that experience where we've been kind of disappointed by our kids, and we kind of go, or maybe by our boss, or our coworkers, or our neighbors, or maybe our spouse when we're traveling and we get down the road maybe about a half an hour and they realize that they forgot their purse at their sister's, and you got to turn all the way around and go and get their purse, and it's going to make you late for the destination, and you have that audible sigh. Not that that ever happened to us. Thank goodness Sarah's not here. But that's what that's what Anak actually refers to. Now here's kind of the strange part about that. It could mean both 10 and an audible sigh of disappointment, either one or at the same time. So in fact, a biblical scholar said that a better way to translate verse 7 should be like this. This is what God showed me. A wall of silver, referring to the 10, is seen. God is standing with silver in hand. I am putting shivering, kind of that idea of a disappointed sigh, in the midst of my people, Israel. The message is that grave. When you look at yourself in the wall, how do you see yourself? Do we measure up with what God has in store, has in plan for us? Or will God be disappointed? Have you ever polished silver? It's hard, tedious work. As you can tell by looking at this cup, I haven't polished this in a very long time. After you polish it for a long time, you begin to think, why in the world am I doing this? But then when you are finally done, and you begin to see the shine and the reflection of yourself that comes out of that, you realize all of the hard work that went into polishing silver. That is the crux of this message. God is hoping to see his reflection in us with this silver. Now that's potential. There is no disappointed sigh here. I want to share with you one of my favorite stories. Outside the gates of heaven, near the entrance to the supreme court of angels and saints, there's a dressing room. It gives candidates before the most important interview of their lives a place to first check their appearance. One day a good and devout woman arrived at heaven's gate. An angel directed her to the dressing room where she found 4 full-length mirrors. She checked her hair and makeup and all was in order. Out of her small casket suitcase, she took her choir robe. She sang every Sunday in church. She slipped on the robe and pinned on it her good conduct medals for piety, donations to clothing drives, and Christmas charity to the poor. Now, 11 months out of the year, she didn't care for the poor. She thought they were lazy individuals, but for Christmas, she made up for it. Next, she put on her rosary, which she had prayed daily, in her pocket, and applying to her face the rouge which glowed from the 3,000 vigil candles she had lighted in her lifetime. She lifted her robe and inspected the calluses on her knees from her long hours of prayer and adoration. All was perfect. Finally, she stepped out of the door and stood before heaven's supreme court. The angels and saints hooted, booed, and threw rotten eggs and tomatoes at her as they shouted, "Shame! Shame!" In tears, she ran out of the courtroom. As she fled weeping, she ran past another woman at the door. The second woman was entering reluctantly since she was a sinner. She never went to church, well, almost never. She never prayed unless a crisis was at hand. She was guilty of a host of petty sins and a few large ones as well. As she entered the dressing room and opened her casket suitcase, she discovered that it was empty. She stood naked before the all-revealing mirrors, her face red with shame. When the angel called next, she pleaded not to be sent before the court. "Please have mercy, I am a sinner. I am ashamed to appear before the saints. I am not worthy to be here." The angel pushed her through the door anyway, and she found herself standing naked before the Supreme Court. As one body, they all stood and applauded loud and long. A neon sign over the entrance to heaven lit up with the message, "Go this way." As she approached the entrance, she saw that it was only 4 feet high. Above it was a sign that read, "Servants' entrance. Appropriate dress required." You shall not pass. This week, as I've shared, I had the wonderful opportunity of being the spiritual advisor at Camp Neweska. It's a beautiful campground, staffed by some wonderful people, and had the opportunity to be there with 4 of our youth. And one of the things that took place, we had a lot of fun going down the Niobrara River. One of the things we did was a few of the counselors were kind of lifting up some famous phrases that come from movies. And as I was listening to them, I was thinking to myself, that would make for a nice sermon series someday. Some of these, I know you will be able to finish them because they are famous, famous phrases. Such as, "Frankly, my dear, I'm going to make you an offer. I've got a feeling we're not in." And you take a recent movies like "Show Me the Money" or "May the Force." I knew Mr. Jones was going to get that one. And of course, "You Shall Not Pass" comes from Lord of the Rings trilogy. It's become kind of a standard when you're going down the interstate and someone's trying to pass you. What's the phrase you say? "You shall not pass." But I think the phrase kind of has a deeper meaning. Because one could read that this passage is about tin or a shiny sheen of silver. It could be about measuring up. It could be about an audible sigh of disappointment. Or it could be the idea that we're not going to let anyone pass us by. We are the standard. We are the ones that are going to measure up and be the people that God wants us to be. Listen to this passage here from Paul. "For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have fully known." A mirror. A shiny surface. What should we be looking at? Who should we measure up to? There's a fantastic phrase, a fantastic passage in the book of Genesis that says, when you were created, God created you in His image. So in fact, when we shine up the silver and we look at ourselves, it is actually God. God is shining right back. That's potential. That is possibility. That is the message of Amos, that we need to measure up. We need to make sure that no one passes us by because of the standards we have. I want to end our message here this morning with a poem that is called "The Woman in the Glass." When you get what you want in your struggle for self, and the world makes you queen for a day, just go to a mirror and look at yourself and see what that woman has to say. For it isn't your husband or family or friend whose judgment upon you must pass. The woman whose verdict counts most in the end is the one staring back in the glass. Some people may think you're a straight-shooting chum and call you a person of place, but the woman in the glass says you're only a bum if you can't look her straight in the face. She's the woman to please, never mind all the rest, for she's with you clear up to the end. And you've passed your most dangerous, difficult test if the woman in the glass is your friend. You may fool the whole world down the pathway of years and get pats on the back as you pass, but your final reward will be heartache and tears if you've cheated the woman in the glass. May we all measure up. May we all look into that shiny surface and see the potential of God shining right back at us. Amen. I'm going to ask the ushers to wait upon us now as we give back to God.